Melissa, I was specifically going to ask about, you talked about eating the rainbow in your diet, and I'd love to hear everybody's take on that, Daniel and Mike's as well. What do you mean by that? I have a friend here, we have an ongoing $1,000 bet about what's the best diet, and he's a low-carb guy, I'm a whole food plant-based. What's your take?
So it's partly...
They're both winners.
Okay, so we're done. Michael answered it. I will just say that I deal with public health and low-income populations, and we can try to, get really granular and think about supplements and read ingredients, and or we can say choose the rainbow. And guess what? We have shown and found that when we steer pregnant women at high risk, low income, with obesity, etc., toward these nutrition choices that are realistic and easy, and even bringing bags of produce is something we've done. We dramatically improve their nutrition, and boy, is it hard to change what someone eats. But when you actually bring it in and teach them, and some basic cooking, we have found transgenerational effects on offspring. We're looking at different metrics, as you've seen. I've shown some social genomics, insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome. So, we're talking about big effects today. We're talking about stress and diet and some kind of magical tech that blows our minds, but will be with us soon. And I will just say that for me, as Michael said, it doesn't nothing matters if you can't do it. All of this, intense studies on the chemicals in blueberries, it's beautiful science, but just choose the rainbow. That works.
I love blueberries. One other interesting thing is sometimes it can be simple. I'm trained in pediatrics as well. There was a great study showing some of your young parents, grandkids, if you take kids when they're 6 months of age and they start their first solid foods, and most people get that Gerber white rice cereal, it's cheap, it tastes good. Instead, if you do the slightly more expensive whole grain, it changes their gut epigenetics and their microbiome, and their long-term risk for obesity and diabetes goes way down. So there's simple things to do that aren't fancy diets, especially early in life. So point number 2 is that our biggest fast food provider is the school lunches, and those aren't very healthy. And so that can make a huge difference early on downstream projections and health span without having to get fancy.
I'll just say 2 other things, if I can, on this. Study came out last week in Nutrients. Guess what? The food that is sold for infants in the stores, if you look at it, 100% was unnutritious, and they had, on average, 4 claims on their package that were illegal by FDA standards. So, if you will, big food is no better, if you will, in doing this. So I did write a blog on it. Two pieces of advertisement, if you will. You can follow me on Substack, where I write crazy stuff like this about kids' food, or, if you will, why Pfizer is selling Paxlovid when they demonstrated it doesn't work. And if you will, the second place is go to Longevity Playbook, sign up for the free newsletter, and there's a little blurb every week.
Awesome. Your thoughts on seed oils? A lot of people wonder what's the best oil to cook with. There's seed oils, which are vegetable oils purported to be healthy, versus switching over to butter and ghee.
Which one of you? I'll just say yes, seed oil.
Yes, to seed oil.
Ghee is very unhealthy.
Ghee's
Okay, so if you will, cooking with anything but that is healthier. But we don't have an answer to the question. We believe if it's going to be something under the smoke point of olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, that you can saute with it without getting to the smoke point and ruining it. Avocado oil is another omega-3 oil that is effective. But we literally, if we spent as much on cancer chemotherapies on nutrition, we would have all these answers and we'd have a healthier society. So if you can do one thing, vote for a candidate who's going to sponsor things in lifestyle.
I don't know anything about different oils, but one of the challenges in the whole, especially the longevity space now, is there's a lot of snake oil, not just seed oil. And making sense of, going to Costa Rica to get stem cells or take this supplement for your mitochondria, it's really hard to make sense of, and we need to figure out a better way to get the right information out.
That's why we curate it.
Right. So you go to Dr. Roizen's platform to learn, but they're still just in the media now, and it's a challenge, science education, and also being able to run some of these studies in new crowdsourced ways could improve our individualized data set.
In general, the patterns, dietary patterns, there's no more solid science than saying, than the Mediterranean diet and longevity studies. The epigenetics is showing us the same thing. The Mediterranean diet extends the epigenetic clock. The American diet shortens it.
And extends telomeres.
Telomeres. So the diet story with telomeres is also exactly the same. There are some things, individual food items that pop out, and we get quite entranced with those, and they're not surprising. Processed meat, which is already carcinogenic, and added sugar always shows up. I haven't seen one good study about added sugar. They're all pretty.
Anything showing a benefit?
Yeah.
No, they all show it.
Okay, short-term positive mood, just a very quick flash of pleasure. It's not worth it because then you kind of sink.
Switching gears a little bit, we heard a lot about the most powerful computer in our pockets and all these apps that we have. Actually, this would be maybe a question that Alyssa can kick off. It's about social media and social comparison as its effects on youth stress.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
telomeres.
I'm so happy that Vivek Murthy, our Surgeon General, has come out with a statement that is already leading to school on the adverse effects of social media and having iPhones at school on mental health of our youth, and schools are already taking the phones out. So that's really exciting. In terms of our bodies and social media and social comparison, one thing that when I think of what's happening with these apps and nudging us toward longevity, we also know that some of our most ancient deep wiring of how we work is about social connection and social safety. And that is how we, get the family, particularly women, to change behavior together, but also all of these apps for meditation and mental health. If we can make them also apps about positive social connectivity, pro-sociality, that is going to be a big lever and a big effect. So getting away from this individual model to the acknowledgement that we're actually, social species, that our health is determined within families and neighborhoods and zip codes. And so if we can use technology in that way, Daniel, I'm waiting for that.
Well, I mean, yes, you can go into a VR headset and be in a social experience. For some folks who might be homebound or have physical or other disabilities, there are new ways to get social, and health is social. And Vivek Murthy is also beyond social media piece, the loneliness epidemic, and addressing that. I think that the statistic is with significant isolation, it's more dangerous than 2 packs a day of smoking. So those interventions are about social engineering, and schools and churches and synagogues and groups like this are good for your health.
We have something that we adopted at the Cleveland Clinic that we adopted from the United Kingdom called social prescribing. You want to describe that?
I'm not sure what that one is, but I know there's a prescription of nature as well. Tree hugging.
This is prescribing, if you will, buddies and prescribing activities for people to do that get other activities involved. So, for example, I had a retired art teacher from New York who had come to Cleveland to care for his mom, and after his mom passed, he didn't have any friends in Cleveland, etc. So we prescribed him to go to I prescribed him to the system, and the system got him to the Cleveland Institute of Art, and he's now teaching, if you will, as a volunteer. He teaches kids in the afternoon. He's the happiest guy in the world because he's got about 40 buddies who are younger than he is.
What is social prescribing?
So social prescribing is writing an order in the electronic medical record that is to get the person into a social connection.
Excellent. You want to say what?
So nature prescriptions, as we move toward really connecting our bodies and minds to, VR and AI, if we can have people like Daniel Kraft keep reminding us that the context of nature, actual real dirt and plants, has a really powerful effect that will never, I don't want to say we'll never match. I think VR is pretty powerful, but is accessible to everyone.
I would say, I mean, it's easy to talk about the shiny objects and wearables and otherbles, but the idea is to get the technology out of the way, so you're not logging in all the time or obsessed by your Aura score, which I always look at in the morning, and enable you to better connect to nature and friends and family, and nudge you in this new way. I mean, that idea, I'm positive of sort of generative health, where each of us has our sort of virtual coach that might show up on our Alexa, or in our virtual platforms, it could still hopefully take you to those better environments.
Thank you. So we all heard that we can have longer telomeres by managing stress, dropping the rope, meditating, eating the rainbow, exercising. Looking at this audience, you can look at the demographic from about 30 to 80-year-olds here. What can we do to build more stem cells? Anything we can do?
Good goal.
Other than not getting sunburned?
It is anything that increases your telomere length, increases the number of duplications that you can have before you run out of stem cells. And with Alyssa and other people's work, it may be that we'll be able to reduce I think he died this week or last week, Hayflick, who had a Hayflick limit. We had 60 to 70. What happens, I'm going to, Elizabeth,
50
Alyssa,
replications.
50 replications. I'm going to describe this wrong. You shorten your telomeres by 6 base pairs, I think, every time you duplicate a cell. And what you want to do is build it so you can keep duplicating. It is, as she described, the protective cap on, why am I?
Yeah, so we can, no, this is all, I mean, there's a built-in limit. And around 80, most people lose the Hayflick limit. They can't go on replicating all of the replenishable shells we need in our brain and our cardiovascular system. I wrote that in my book, it's around 80. And my mom, who is 80, was like, that, that was the most upsetting page. I can't go on, we can't change anyway. So I took out the 80 because there's elasticity. It really depends. So about the stem cells. When we're born, we get these niches of these gorgeous stem cells that are determined how many we get for the rest of our lives. So we want to keep them healthy. I mean, unless we're talking about some of the new technology with, killing old cells is good, but we really rely on our stem cells. So I know there's a track on women's health that I'm admiring here. And one thing we know about longevity, kind of lifespan longevity, is not just cross-sectionally, what can we do to kind of boost our stem cells? And hormetic stress is great. We heard many examples of stressing ourselves out to get more robust cells and do autophagy, clean up all the junk in our cells. But the fact is, prenatal stress is a quantum aging moment, both for maternal health, but especially for the offspring. We know that stress during pregnancy predicts coming out with shorter telomeres, and there are studies, we're trying to look at stem cells in humans. It's a bit harder, but there's other periods. Early puberty in girls is another period of early aging and predicts shorter telomeres and greater epigenetic aging the earlier you have puberty. What causes early puberty? Obesity and early childhood experiences, trauma, stress. And so these are big points in aging. Men go through a somatic andropause as well. So aging is not equally linear throughout the lifespan. We have these reproductive changes. Of course, menopause is a big one, when our stem cells are dramatically being affected. And so protecting young men and women and their sperm and eggs before they get pregnant is actually a great way to think about aging and public health.
And then there's lots of interesting science on the stem cell side of things. Altos Labs is, I think you mentioned this, epigenetic reprogramming. I invented a device at Stanford called a marrow miner, so you might want to pull out your bone marrow stem cells, bank them, and use them later to be a sort of younger source from yourself. That's one other element. And there's
a marrow miner.
The marrow miner.
Is it in use?
FDA cleared, and we'll harvest your cells in the backstage. So the idea is you could do in 10 minutes.
Okay, I'm actually up for it.
Okay, well, we'll look at this. The other interesting element is there's a lot of sort of stem cell therapies out there, but maybe not be the stem cells themselves, so maybe the secretomes. There's a whole new field of regenerative medicine using the sort of gemisch of things that come out from exosomes and beyond that might have a lot of long-term
But you
applications.
need stem cells for the secretomes to work.
From your own secretomes, but
Yeah.
therapeutics that are secretome derived are going to be interesting as well. So stay healthy.
Awesome. I think we're actually out of time, but I would like to ask one more question so we can end up with looking towards the future. We heard a lot about our scientifically engineered future in the next 5, 10, 15 years. Really, realistically, and yet we've heard so many stories about uBiome and so many scam companies talking about how they can predict so many things, like the translation isn't there on the science. So honestly, and what's the evidence for how soon we'll actually be able to generate new knees or hips or pancreas?
Well, yeah, in terms of body part replacement, there's some exciting work. ARPA-H, which is sort of inspired by DARPA, have a big several $100 million initiative to regrow knees and cartilage, and there's some science out of Stanford beyond that may enable you to take your own stem cells and make them into cartilage or off-the-shelf allogeneic, so that might replace their knee replacement piece. At the same time, big picture, when will all of these things arrive? I think there's going to be some movement towards precision or personalized longevity, because the cocktail that works for Alyssa or me or anybody else might be quite different depending on all these sort of factors. But lots of things are in the chute.
So, Dan, you probably have a more realistic idea of when this is occurring. I think it was Bill Gates said, in 2 years, nothing as much as you expect happens, but in 10 years, a lot more. This really got kicked into high gear in 2021. So I expect that by 2031, we will have some idea of whether if the 80% comes true or the 20% comes true. Because there are 14 shots on goal, there's enough money in the field now that we should be able to have realistic. For example, the company I'm working as a consultant with is doing large dog trials, and then if those are positive, they will move quickly to human trials, assuming the FDA gives them the go-ahead. So we're getting things that are moving pretty fast that I'm amazed at.
I totally agree. The analogy, there's Moore's law, but there's Amara's law, which is sort of the Bill Gates quote that we tend to overestimate what happened in 2 years and underestimate what happens in a decade. Like even 10 years ago or 12 years ago, we had IBM Watson. We thought we'd have IBM doctors, in 2 years, but now 10 years later, we have AI really hitting its stride. At the same time, we need some things accelerated on science, but regulatory and reimbursement and the workflows of medicine are often behind. So we need to bring the regulators along to reinvent and accelerate. Best how to get the FDA to shift its path.
No one wants to hear this, but the real prevention long-term is us thinking about syncing our personal health with planetary health. So it's really ironic to study aging in an era of doomerism when we haven't solved the climate crisis. If we don't make big changes, the heat, the pollution, all of these are going to ruin all of our anti-aging attempts. Sorry, I don't want to end there, but so, psychological mental health about the climate is super important, because how can we be motivated if we think it's predetermined? So my favorite project right now is working with undergraduates in California. We're at 10 UC campuses. I just launched a course that is using all of the heartful meditation and values of compassion and bodhisattva and wisdom of the long view of time to motivate our youth to move from distress to action. And our results are amazing. We're just going to keep going and spread because they need this. They're really wondering, should they even have kids in this world? And so it's exciting to think about motivating, changing mental health with some of the contemplative dyadic strategies. Also, small group connection is a form of meditation, deep, compassionate listening. And that is a longevity intervention as well.
Great. Well, how about another big round of applause for our speakers?